This is Maria Cristina Saraceno from Rome at Home, your Roman consul, and today we're going to learn to see ancient Rome everywhere around Rome. Why? Because at first glance you might think that all that is left is ruins. Here I'm taking a picture from the Orti Farnesiani on top of the Palatine Hill, and I'm looking down on the Roman Forum. You can see a lot of ruins. You might see spectacular reconstructions of splendid temples and basilicas of Roman times in very, very helpful books that help your imagination. But really, all that you see is this, which is much destruction and not much else. So what are you going to do? Here we're seeing the Basilica of Maxentius, and at the back you can see the Colosseum, and lots of ruins in between. Your frustration will be tangible when you are in Rome, when you're asked to imagine the splendor of a temple, and actually all you can see is this, its podium. Here we are on top of the Palatine Hill. It's a temple of Heliogabalus, and there's not much left apart from the pediment of the temple. Nothing else, only the base. So now you will learn how to see ancient Rome, not the ruins, but in the living city. You will see ancient Rome just in a different form and not the one you're normally used to see it. So we'll go through reusing and recycling Roman style. So 2 things. Next, in the next module, we're going to go through reusing, and that is a way that has let ancient building come down to us. They've been used in a new way and we still have them. Chances are, if they hadn't been converted for a new function, we would not have them today. So we have to be really thankful that they became something else during their life. So the whole building has often been revamped and refurbished to serve a new purpose. And in the next module, this is what we will look at. So we'll focus on these structures and see how they've been preserved through times. So this is an example of what we'll do in the next module. The Temple of Hadrian is now the Chamber of Commerce. It's in a place in a square called the Piazza di Pietra, square of stone, and you can see why it's a square of stone. So recycling, it's a different thing. It's when ancient materials were used in new forms. So sometimes part of ancient buildings like columns, bricks or basins or floors or decorations have been reused in totally new structures in a different part of town. This is what we'll look at today. You are going to learn to spot recycled materials so that you can imagine them in the temples, the basilicas, the theatres, the stadiums of ancient Rome. So you're going to see them today in a totally different context of what they used to be, and you're going to have to imagine putting them back in their own original structures. For example, this is a coffin originally used for the body of a child, and now it's used as a flower pot. Here we are in a garden, in the garden of Palazzo Colonna, not far from Piazza Venezia, that we know so well. And Palazzo Colonna belongs to one of the oldest families in Rome, dating back since the medieval times, and they've been extremely powerful in Rome ever since, for about 1,000 years now. So, who destroyed ancient Rome? Was it the barbarians? What happened here? Why there is all this desolation? Where are all the basilicas? Here you are looking down from the Orti Farnesiani onto, there is Capitol Hill, there is the Arch of Septimius Severus, there is the Curia Julia, which used to be the Senate, and then you see lots of other temples. This is the place where Julius Caesar, the body of Julius Caesar was burnt after his death, and to this day you can still go here and people do put coins over the place where it was cremated. You find the Basilica Julia, and on the other side of the main road, which is Via dei Foli Imperiali, you'll find the Imperial Forum. But everything is in ruins, or most everything. But it wasn't the barbarians. They cut the aqueducts and the water supply to the city, and that was enough to crush Rome. So Rome went from over 1 million, now they're even saying 2 millions, down to about 20,000 in the Dark Ages because it had no water. If you had been an artist during the Renaissance or even the Middle Ages, where would you have gone for materials? During ancient Rome, they just went out in the empire and brought back the stones. But during medieval or Renaissance times, Rome had no longer immense power. So the popes did not have easy access to the materials from the whole of Europe and Africa and Asia. So what did they do? The Romans destroyed ancient Rome. So the popes gave permission, patrons and artists ripped apart the ancient buildings, and merchants became really rich selling marbles and other materials. So we destroyed the Roman Forum, we destroyed the Imperial Forum, and all sorts of other structures of ancient Rome. So today we're going to see a lot of examples of things that have been pinched from one building and used to create another building. It might be yet a masterpiece, just in a different form. So when you see these things in Renaissance or medieval buildings, not much medieval buildings still standing, then you are going to bring them back in your imagination to the way they used to look in their original place of use, which was either a temple or a theatre or a stadium or a palace. So I want you to look for more examples of this stuff when you're in Rome, of recycled materials. And I want you to have a sort of a game with the people in your traveling party so that you all try spotting recycled materials. And the person in your traveling party who scores the most recycled materials wins a drink or a gelato at the end of the day. It's easy, it's simple, it's fun. Try it. So let's go through recycling. We're going to have a look at recycling columns, marbles and other stones, bronze, obelisks, bricks, board games even, bathtubs, marble statues, foundations, decorations, even the Colosseum, and we'll just have a look at coffins as well. So we're going to start with the columns. Observe the columns and recreate the past. So many churches and palaces today have been built, that are standing today, have been built pinching ready-made columns from ancient temples and basilicas. So observe the columns and try to imagine them in the ancient buildings and try magic up in your mind these ancient buildings. So this is a much loved church and square. It's called Santa Maria in Trastevere, St. Mary in Trastevere. Trastevere is one of the areas that is most loved by Romans and tourists alike. It used to be lived in by foreigners. It's on the other side of the river in comparison to where the main city is, and it's still a big hit with foreigners today. If you go here at night, it'll be full of people in bars, pubs, restaurants, and if you've been to Rome, you've been here before for sure. So if you go inside, you find a picture-perfect church with beautiful mosaics, and it looks perfect. It looks stunning, but have a look at the columns. They all look different. Look at the capital and at the color of the column. This one is grey, this one is not, and it's a totally different capital. They are all different. If you look at the bases, you can see this one has got some acanthus leaves, and it's a particular type of granite. There's a completely different granite, different base, and the reason is they all come from different temples and basilicas and palaces and baths. So when you get into a church, have a look at its columns and all the decorations. They have probably been recycled. Here we're in a totally different place. We are in the courtyard at the Church of San Clemente. We are close to the Colosseum. And San Clemente, we had a look at it before. It's a church in different layers. And up at the top, there's the most recent layer. In the middle, there is the Basilica of the 4th century. And down at the bottom, there is some Roman homes and a temple of Mithras, the Mitreum. And if you come and have a look, even in the courtyard, have a look at the columns, they are all different. This is just outside the courtyard on the main road. And again, the columns are different because they're being pinched from different places. Here we are at the St. John in Lateran Hospital, right next to the church, and again, all from different temples. Here we're in a completely different place. We are in St. Agnes outside the walls. It's a church that is very dear to me because it's our church, and I have christened my children in this church. If you can have a look at the columns, you will see again all different. Capitals different, but imagine them in the original temples and basilicas. Here we're in the center of town in Palazzo Baldassini, not far from the Pantheon, still different, and they are built in the structure of the palazzo. The past is everywhere. Here we're just in a square. You're going to have a look at the square in a second. And it's just part of the building. Columns pinched somewhere else and reused. It's just building materials. There was no conservation involved at the time at all. So guess where we are? Have a look at the reflection in the shop window. Does it remind you of something? We are right in front of Fontana di Trevi, in the little square in front of Fontana di Trevi. And even the United Colors of Benetton shop can boast ancient Roman columns. So this is one of the basilicas we saw before in the Forum, in the Roman Forum. It's called the Basilica of Maxensis and Constantine. But what happened? Now it looks all bricks, but it used to be splendid with marbles and all sorts of other stones, and it used to have beautiful columns and beautiful statues inside. Do we know where the columns of this basilica went? Well, we know that one went right here. We call it now the Column of Peace. It was brought here by Pope Paul V of the Borghese family in the early 1600s. It's right in front of a majestic place. That is Santa Maria Maggiore. The Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore is one of the 4 main churches of Rome, and it's a much-loved church. I took the picture of the column standing in this loggia, which you can go and visit. It's got beautiful mosaics and beautiful statues too. And then right next to it, you can go and visit the apartments of Pope Paul V, the one who put up the column. And you can even visit underneath the church some ancient Roman domuses and remains. This is a totally different use of the column. A lot humbler, but I think a lot more important than the previous column. These were the funerary stones of some members of the Jewish community. So they were recycled around 1570. They are now at the Capitoline museums. And so it was just capitals that were used to mark the graves of some very important members of the Jewish community. How did we destroy palaces and temples? Let's see a visible example of one big failure. We did try to get the columns down, we didn't manage, and you can still see the signs. This is the temple of Antonino and Faustina. Now, Antoninus was a Roman emperor, Faustina was his wife, and Faustina died first, and she became a goddess Faustina. And Antonino, who loved her very much, erected this temple to her. Now, when Antonino died, then the temple became to the two gods, Antoninus and Faustina. If you have a look at it from the front, you see up at the top it says Divo Antonino, so to the god Antoninus, and to the Diva Faustina, and to the goddess Faustina. You can also see up at the top there is a cross. Now, this is a temple that we're going to see in the next module as well, because it's one that has been reused. As in, the temple is still standing because it has been transformed, it's been reused in a different way. It used to be a temple to Antonina and Faustina, it's now a church. But the reason why I'm showing you this picture is have a look at these marks here on the columns. So the Romans wanted to take these columns down. They put ropes around them and they pulled and pulled and pulled, but they didn't manage to pull the columns down. But they did manage to damage the columns. So you can still see the marks of where the ropes were tied to pull them down. And so sometimes we do know where columns or other bits and pieces of a building came from that have been reused in newer buildings. Most often we do not. So one case, for example, where we actually do know where the bits and pieces came from and where they ended up is about the doors of the Senate of ancient Rome, the Curia Julia. They are now the doors of the Cathedral of Rome, which is St. John Lateran. But this is just an example. So now we're going to have a look at marbles and other stones. Ancient Roman palaces, ancient Roman spas, ancient Roman temples, they were all plastered in beautiful stones and marbles. What happened to them? We can't see them any longer. They're still there. We can see them, just in different places. So if you go in churches, for example, or in palaces, look at the floors, look at the walls. This is a church called San Crisogono. It's in Trastevere, not far from Santa Maria in Trastevere. And this is the floor. It's a so-called Cosmatesco floor. There were a couple of families in the Middle Ages that started a particular art of creating beautiful floors with ancient Roman stone. And I took some examples where I took some pictures of cases where you could really see that these stones had been reused, because there is parts of a stone that was inscribed. So it says Claudia, etc., and probably coming from Macedonia. But all the other stone is recycled as well from older buildings. Here we are in San Clemente. Here we are in St. Agnes outside the walls. Here we are in Santa Maria Maggiore. So you can see the Cosmatesque floors are extremely beautiful, extremely intricate, but they're all used with pietre di spoglio, so stones that have been pinched somewhere else. Here we're in a different church. It's called the Santi Quattro Coronati. The picture is not quite as clear as it could be, but it gives you an idea of what I mean by recycling bits and pieces of stone. Now, the more you could pay, the better stone you could get. So here we are in the Galleria Borghese, which used to be the suburban villa of Cardinal Scipione Borghese, who was the nephew of Pope Paul V Borghese, the one who took the column from Masenzius Basilica and put it in front of Santa Maria Maggiore. So the bigger and better pieces of stone and marbles clearly went to those who could pay the most. Now I want you to look at the next pictures, and I want you to imagine being in an ancient Roman palace or temples or baths. Then I want you to guess where we actually are. Okay, so imagine we are in an ancient Roman basilica, such as Maxentius Basilica. This is how it used to look like. It doesn't now, it all looks just like brick and concrete, but this is what it used to look like. This is what it is now. And you can see all the construction sites. Those are because the underground is being built underneath with much difficulty. So imagine that desolation, this desolation, as this. This is how the Basilica of Maxentius would have appeared in Maxentius and Constantine's times. And also like this. But now imagine, where can we be? Where can all this stone be now and be that beautiful? In Rome. Yes, I'm sure you'll guess. We are in St. Peter's. I'm taking this picture from up at the top, at the base of the cupola of the dome of St. Peter, on the way to go to the very top outside. Another recycled material that we have recycled all through the centuries, it's bronze. Bronze, now we hardly have any artifacts of ancient times because they were almost entirely melted into coins and weapons. There are a couple of notable exceptions, so I'm going to show you those. One is this beautiful statue of the boxer at Palazzo Massimo. Palazzo Massimo is a wonderful place where you can go. It's right next to the main station, Termini, and you're going to find lots of statues on one floor, lots of mosaics on another floor, and up at the top it's a special place where some rooms have been recreated with frescoes from ancient Roman buildings. One particular one which I love is a garden room where all the walls, all the frescoes recreate a garden, and that comes from the Villa di Livia at Prima Porta. So from the villa of Augustus's wife Livia in a place called Prima Porta in the outskirts of Rome. Now, this bronze statue is spectacular in itself. You can notice the details, you can notice the wounds, and you can notice the hair. He only survived because he was buried underground until fairly recently in Roman history. Imagine how many masterpieces we would have to this day if they hadn't been melted into weapons and coins. Now, we got at the top of the Campidoglio, the statue of Marcus Aurelius. Now, this is actually a copy, and the real statue of Marcus Aurelius after restoration is inside the museum, and the Capitoline Museum, that is, you can get into from the square itself. But it is only there because the Romans thought it was not Marcus Aurelius, we thought it was Constantine. And because it was Constantine, he had allowed Christianity, he did the act of tolerance and allowed Christianity to be a free religion. And so he was spared the being melted. Now, there's a really famous artist called Gian Lorenzo Bernini. We have seen in Piazza Navona his Fountain of the Four Rivers, for example. And he got the bronze of the Pantheon to make the baldachin of St. Peter's. So in this case, at least, the bronze went from one masterpiece to another, from the beautiful Pantheon to St. Peter's, and it was not used to make weapons. Obelisks have traveled to adorn different sites. So obelisks have definitely been reused and recycled. Now we are going to have a look at one obelisk, and it's going to be the Vatican obelisk, which is the one that is in St. Peter's Square. This is well, as you know, St. Peter's, this is the obelisk in the middle of the square, and in 1586 the obelisk was moved to St. Peter's Square. Where was it before? Now, this is a map, so let's look from above. This is the Church of St. Peter's, and this is the big square in front of St. Peter's with the colonnade by Bernini. The obelisk now stands here in the middle of the square. Before Christian times, or even actually during Christian times, because it was after the birth of Christ, but before Christianity was allowed, before the Edict of Constantine, here, right next to where now the Basilica stands, used to be the circus of Caligula and Nero. So Caligula started building it and Nero finished building it. And right in the middle, in the spine, in the middle of the stadium, used to be the obelisk. So the obelisk, until 1586, was standing right next to the Basilica. And the Basilica was built here because in this stadium, St. Peter's was crucified, and it was just buried right outside the stadium. And then clearly St. Peter's, the Basilica, was built over his tomb. And so you can see today, right next to St. Peter's, in the Vatican grounds, there is a little square which will say the Vatican obelisk used to lie here, used to stand here rather, until 1586. And I strongly suggest that you go and have a look where it stood, not because that is important at all, but because when you get to these two arches and you get through this little door, you can go and visit the underground cemetery under the St. Peter's. So before St. Peter's was built, before even the first basilica was built, there used to be a cemetery, an open-air cemetery, not a catacomb, but an open-air cemetery, pretty much like ours, with little chapels. And it's a spectacular place because you are in ancient Roman times, you're in a road, and all the different chapels have got different symbols. So you find some chapels where the Greek and the Roman gods are to be seen, and so you'll have Jupiter, and you'll have Bacchus, and you'll have Venus, and so on and so forth, Mars. But then you'll find some chapels where Horus is, and other Egyptian gods, and then you'll find chapel where the Good Shepherd and the fish and all the other Christian signs are. So it must have been a time which was extremely interesting, where different religion were practiced side by side by Romans. You can only go and visit this place if you book it in this little Ufficio Scavi, office of the digs. Now, let's have a look at bricks. Even bricks were recycled. So if you see medieval or Renaissance brickwork in town, have a look. If the bricks are smaller, irregular than you would expect, they have been recycled from other buildings. So for example, back to San Crisogono in Trastevere, if you go and have a look at all the stones that make this bell tower, they've all been recycled. Board games. Oh, let's stay in medieval times. This looks like a medieval fortress. It's a very rare find in Rome. We are going to the Basilica of the Santi Quattro Coronati, or the Four Crowned Ones. It's on the Sicilian Hill, it's close to San Clemente, and the original basilica is from the 4th century. but most of what you will see is from medieval times. This is the entrance. There are cloistered nuns inside. You can only visit some bits and pieces freely. The nuns will let you in some other bits and pieces. It's a bit difficult because they are cloistered, and you will need to book to see some other really special parts of this complex. But this is a place where you can go freely without booking, without even calling the nuns. It's a beautiful and peaceful cloister that was all built with ancient materials. So all the pieces of marble that you see, it's all from the Forum. And amongst others, there's a piece of marble that has got a board game carved on it. Now, it used to be that people had to wait a long time when they were in the basilicas in the Forum, because maybe they were there for a judgment. They were there to see a judge and lawyers. And often on the steps of the basilicas, there were board games so that people would not get too bored. And so this is just one that was carved in and that was reused in this beautiful, beautiful cloister. Now that you're familiar with recycling in Rome a bit, how would you recycle a bathtub from the imperial baths? What would you do to reuse a bathtub? This particular ones will be from the bath of Caracalla. Well, the tubs of the twin fountains in Piazza Farnese, which is one of the squares next to Campo dei Fiori, Field of Flowers, where there's a market and then a lot of drinking at night, and a lot of food, comes from the bath of Caracalla. So Piazza Farnese, Palazzo Farnese, it's now the French embassy. The Farnese family gave popes. It's not a family that is still living. So now the palace is property of the French embassy. The two fountains right in front of it, the tubs, come from the ancient baths of Caracalla. Whereas, if you needed sinks, you could always carve them in an inscribed marble slab of all times. So, an ancient Roman marble slab, they needed sinks, they just used that to carve them out. And what would you do with the marble statues? Of course, it's a terrible thing to think about, but they didn't care about conservation. So what they did, they would burn down thousands of marble statues, literally thousands, to make lime for construction. You could also chuck all the marble statues as materials for the foundations of palaces, which has sometimes been better because we have found big batches of marble statues that had been thrown into the foundations of some palaces. At least they hadn't been completely destroyed. But most of them we'll never find because we're not going to destroy the palaces or any palaces in the center of Rome now. We might find them when there are digs for the underground stations. In medieval and Renaissance time, every ancient public building had a lime kiln next to it, una calcara, that's like an oven where you would burn down marbles or travertine and make lime. That is how the Forum was annihilated. Stones pinched and materials burnt down to make lime. So this is a picture picture I took from an illustration at the Cripta Balbi, which was an ancient theatre. You can go and visit not far from Piazza Venezia. And this illustrates very well how it used to work. So you had the lime kiln and people breaking down columns, marbles, statues, and then burning them down to make lime. This is at the Crypta Balbi. You can still see one lime kiln of medieval time, close to Piazza Venezia. Get inside the Crypta Balbi. You can only see this actually on Saturdays and Sundays. The other days of the week you normally cannot see it, or you might give them a call first to arrange a viewing. You can also see in the Crypta Balbi, you can see the parts of the theatre, other foundations, but you can also see a Mitraeum and parts of buildings that have served as stables from ancient Roman structures. Foundations. So we have seen it before. All the structures served as foundations for new one. You can spot them from the sky or in a map. This is what we've been doing when we've looked at Piazza Navona. So you know already that Piazza Navona used to be the Stadium of Domitian, and that all the buildings around it have been built on the bleachers. And if you go in the cellars of the buildings around Piazza Navona, you're still going to find ancient Roman remains of the Stadium of Domitian. Now, here we're back in Campo dei Fiori in Piazza Farnese. So from the sky, this is Campo dei Fiori with the market in the morning. At the back of it, there is Piazza Farnese with the two twin columns with the bathtubs from the baths of Caracalla. And right at the back of Campo dei Fiori, Field of Flowers, you find an interesting shaped area which used to be the theatre of Pompeius. It dates back to the 1st century before Christ. Again, if you go in the basements of all of these buildings, you're going to find remains of the Pompeius Theatre. Now just have a look. I just want you to see it. You can see it even with no signs at all. All of this area looks like the bleachers of the seats and the cavea of the theatre of Pompeius. It was forbidden at the time to have a theatre that was not just a wooden theatre, and this was not a wooden theatre, but Pompeius had a really clever idea. So what he did is the seats were thought as just a staircase to the temple that he'd built to Venus at the end. So here was the temple, and to get there you had to use the steps, which were also used as the seats for the theatre. This is if you're on the ground. You are in Largo del Pallaro, and this is part of the cavea. So this round building has been built on the steps leading up to the temple and the seats of the theatre. Decorations. All sorts of decorations. I could go on for ages, but I will just choose a couple. From the Theatre of Pompeius, we are on top of the Campidoglio, the Cordonata del Campidoglio, the easy steps to Capitol Hill. I got married here on Capitol Hill, so I had to walk these steps when I got married. And there are two statues at the right and the left of the stairs, Castor and Polluce. Castor and Pollux, also called the Dioscuri. They both come from right next to the Theatre of Pompeius. They have been restored, and in ancient times, not in ancient times, but in Renaissance times, they didn't particularly restore as we now would think. One of the two Dioscuri had a head missing, and they just carved out a new head and put them on their head. These are from Trajan's Forum. They are now in Michelangelo's cloister. There are some really monstrously huge, colossal statues of animals. there is a ram, a camel, a horse, a rhino, an elephant, a bull, and an ox that used to adorn the Trajan's Forum and now adorn Michelangelo's cloister at the Diocletian's baths. You are right in front of Stazione Termini, so if you're waiting at the station, you haven't got anything better to do, come and have a look. This is a crocodile. What's a crocodile doing in Rome? It's in Palazzo Colonna, next to Piazza Venezia. The Colonna family, one of the eldest families in Rome, and always been in power. To this day, they're still princes, and they had in their garden the temple to Serapis. We in Rome had not only the Roman gods or the Greek gods, but also, especially after Caesar and Augustus's time, we started having Egyptian gods. And so you'll find in town not only the pyramid of Caius Caesius, but also temples to Isis and Serapis, I'm not sure how you say it in English. And so in the garden of this palace, there used to be a huge, massive, big temple to Serapis, and this crocodile comes from there. Here we are in the Galleria Borghese. Now, Cardinal Scipione Borghese, we saw him earlier, we spoke about him earlier, the nephew of Pope Paul V, early 1600s. He just got whole mosaics from villas and put them in his suburban villa. So you find some gladiatorial games and some hunting games, which we call venaziones. Now, let's move on, and we're almost done for today, but you're getting a lot of ideas on what to look for when you are in Rome, not just the Forum and the Colosseum for ancient Roman things. Now, let's have a look at this Colosseum. What happened to it? It was a fabulous quarry. It just gave so much stone. It's not funny. And stones from here went into building a lot of masterpieces all around town. And so, for example, here we are in Piazza Venezia. I am taking the picture from up at the top of the Vittoriano, the big white typewriter monument. And you can look down to, on the right, there is the copy of the original. So this is Palazzo delle Assicurazioni Generali. On the other side, which is more recent, on the other side there is one of the first Renaissance palaces, Palazzo Venezia. And Palazzo Venezia was built with stones from the Colosseum. But also, so not only Palazzo Venezia, but also the Church of San Marco, St. Mark's Church, which is right next to it and part of it. But also, this is Palazzo Farnese, which is now the French embassy, with the two baths from the Caracalla, with the two bathtubs from the Caracalla baths in front of it. This was built with stone from the Colosseum. And this is the Palazzo dei Conservatori on the Capitol Hill, on the Campidoglio. I have at the back of me the two Dioscuri, Castor and Polluce, recovered from near the theatre of Pompeius, and the Palazzo dei Conservatori is built with stone from the Colosseum. And this is the Palazzo of the Cancelleria. It's not far, the Chancellery. It's not far from Campo dei Fiori as well. And again, stones from the Colosseum. This is the inside of the Cancelleria, and I don't know if you can notice her, but there is a lady and she is having a snack on leftover ancient columns. Quite a place. There is an exhibition on Leonardo in this, pretty much in the place where I took the picture from. So you can go and visit that. There are all Leonardo's machines. Ooh, what about coffins or sarcophagi? Well, some have not changed their function much. Here we are under San Crisogono in Trastevere. San Crisogono is one of the many churches where you can go underneath. And I strongly suggest that if you are in Trastevere, you do go underneath. You need to ask in the sacristy, in the next to the main altar where the priest would get ready. And they will just open a little door and you can walk underneath all by yourself. I can tell you more about this part of the church. Anyway, this one was just used as an ossuary. But would you drink from a coffin? In Rome, there are sarcophagi everywhere that have been reused as fountains. So chances are you almost for sure will drink from one of them at some point or the other. Just don't think it's a coffin. This one, it's another fountain that is not running, and it's actually being used by the homeless as a wardrobe or a deposit for their stuff. Here we are back in Palazzo Colonna, in the garden of it. Up at the top there would be the Temple to Serapis, and they have decorated the garden with many coffins or sarcophagi. Would you do the same? They also have 3 beautiful full sarcophagi up at the top of the garden. They use them as basins to wash their dirty laundry. So again, Palazzo Colonna. It's open only on Saturday mornings. You do not have to book, but it's only open on Saturday mornings, so I think from 9 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Absolutely worth a visit. So, in today's module, we have seen that ancient Rome is all around you wherever you are in town. It's not just in the Forum, it's not just in the Colosseum. Everywhere you go, see ancient Rome. So often these places will leave you frustrated, the Palatine Hill, the Forum, the Colosseum, because you want more. You'll see a lot of ruins, and sometimes it's difficult to get your head around the fact that they used to be majestic places. So Rome pervades the city. Every time you see decorations in a church or a palace, think that it probably dates back to ancient Rome. So today we have seen how we recycled columns, marbles and other stones, bronze, obelisks, bricks, board games, bathtubs, marble statues, foundations, decorations of all sorts, the Colosseum, and sarcophagi or coffins. And this was only just a tease. So when you are in Rome, no matter which historical period any buildings was built in, look for details that come from another era. Your task when you are in Rome is you have to think that you're a detective or an archaeologist, and you have to score a point for everything you spot, which you think has been recycled. Whoever in your traveling party spots the most recycled features wins a drink or a gelato at the end of the day. And let me know how you go. Send me a message. I'll be interested in knowing that. So in the next module, we're going to see how some of the ancient and not so ancient buildings have adapted to times, and we'll see how they have survived through the centuries because of their new function. Until then, ciao ciao from your Roman consul, Maria Cristina Saraceno.